Hello, everybody. Happy May Day, solidarity, and welcome to the 15th episode of Shred Radio. As always, big thanks to folks that have been tuning in. Welcome to new folks. We're so happy you're here in this universe with us and spending a little time on May Day talking about organizing and people and words and all the great stuff we love to talk about here at Shred. I've got some allergies going on, so please excuse me as my sinuses revolt here in Charleston, West Virginia. The music you heard in the intro is a song called Moon Pie Chart by Daymaker, and our very own guest, Erin, is the singer in Daymaker. I think that's how we actually met, right? In some gritty Chicago basement, probably, at a Daymaker show. I remember I saw you play and the mic kept like electrocuting you, and you in the basement show that I met you at, I think. And I was like, you just kept performing, kept getting back up. So that's my earliest memory of Erin. So check out Daymaker on Bandcamp. We're so excited to have such an amazing group of folks here today to talk about labor organizing. Here at Shred, we of course want to acknowledge the centrality of unionism and labor struggle in building a world based on care, community, and abundance. We also think it's really important to investigate what these struggles actually look like in real time and with real people involved, and to also unpack the various symbols and words like labor, working class, organizer, and even the word union that we find really useful, but whose meaning can change drastically based on time and place. So today I get to talk to Erin Delaney, Ted Minh, and our very own Patrick Johnson-Whitty, who's usually actually playing producer for me here during Shred Radio episodes. We're really happy to have you on screen today, Patrick. It's great to see your face and your kitty back there who is lounging, as we all should be, day in and day out. So I'm going to read some bios. We're going to do our regular little body check-in, and then we'll get rolling with the questions. I know I have a lot of talking up front, but I want to make sure everybody gets a proper intro just so we know who we're talking with. So Erin Delaney is a Chicago-based artist and labor organizer. Working in performance and music, her work investigates a productive collaboration between artist and audience through shared tasks and service. Erin Delaney uses performance as a tool for alliance building, creating platforms for empathy and awareness in line with her social and political concerns. She is currently working as lead organizer with the Chicago chapter of Fight for 15, supporting fast food workers in their fight for a union, and as a member of the UMAW Chicago local. Erin is open to supporting any union effort that requires an organizer, so if you hate your boss, hit her up. Ted Minh is a warehouse worker at Amazon and a member of Amazonians United Chicagoland. He unites with coworkers to build community that fights for better working conditions and respect for all workers. His interests are nature walks, Asian food, cats, and the liberation of all oppressed peoples in the world. Highly resonate with those interests. Those are also my interests. And then we've got Patrick Johnson-Whitty, a core member of Shred's team. We've been building Shred with Patrick for over a year now. Originally, Patrick wanted to play saxophone, but his middle school band director told him he would get into college for free if he played the bassoon, so that's what he did. Somehow this turned into a career, and he now lives in San Francisco, where he has been a member of the San Francisco Ballet Orchestra since 2010. Patrick wants to build a vision for a world where the arts are seen as a public good, not a private luxury. And Patrick organizes with UMAW, Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, and is a member of the American Federation of Musicians. So welcome, everybody. That's who's on the call today. So blessed to have you all. We do like to start Shred Radio just taking a moment to take care of our nervous systems. Obviously, it's been a year of adapting as human beings to communicating through screens, and we're missing out on like 80% of what it is to share space with each other. So let's just, if it feels comfortable for everybody in, listening, if you want to join us, feel free. Just take a moment to breathe and do a nice deep exhale. And just if your body is interested in moving or feeling more comfortable, if there's anything that you could do to make your time during this call a little bit more comfortable and supported, please feel free to get up and move around. If you're listening, maybe this is a nice time to take a walk outside. If you want to snuggle your cat or get a drink or smoke a joint or whatever you want to do to make this afternoon a little nicer for you, that's great. And I also like to drink a little water here. And we also like Shred to feel like a party when it can. So I'm curious if folks are doing anything that feels like a party today, something to feel joy. How about you, Patrick?
I'm probably after this going to go outside and sit in the sun and have a beer.
Nice. How about you, Erin?
I got invited to a party, so I might
Oh,
go party. I might go outdoor party with like 3 other vaccinated people.
it's a crowd at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
Turn up. How about you, Ted?
I just got insight from being outside, which was nice at the park. There are a lot of people out, so it's kind of like a big outdoor party. And then also I go to sleep at 4 p.m. nowadays because I work overnight. So not too much more, not too much more partying going on this afternoon for me.
Okay. Yeah, Ted, and you said you started something called a mega cycle, which means you only have this tiny window of time during May Day. So again, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us. Can you briefly tell us what a mega cycle is?
Yeah, it's just a 10-hour shift overnight that goes from 1:20 a.m. to 11:50 a.m. And yeah, it's 2 cycles in one, sacrificing our bodies and minds for Jeff Bezos.
Wow. Well, let's end that as soon as possible. And in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. Your energy and presence is really appreciated. We always like to frame our Shred Radio conversations just by reminding ourselves that we are all animals that exist in a dual world. So we have our sensory real-time material experiences, and then we have a second virtual world of symbols and meanings and language. And so we use symbols to try to point at processes in the world that are not static. And that includes ideologies, movements, political labels, even historical figures, our favorite writers. All of these things are processes. They're not static things. And so when we communicate about them, we just try to do our best to remember that what we're actually doing when we say X is something or other, it's that we're actually trying to use symbols to point to a process. And so the word and the symbol is not necessarily the thing. The two are different. And so we like to keep those contexts in mind. And just to remember that Erin, Ted, Patrick, and I are all processes as well, and we are processing together. And so we all come from similar and different contexts and timelines. And the labels we currently use for our experiences are grounded in history and currently in process, and they will always be in process. And the symbols that we find most useful today are likely to change and evolve as we learn and grow. And so the way that we think about or name things now may change tomorrow, next year, 5 years from now. Ideally will change, and we can expect that. So that's the context we like to give to Shred conversations, just to remind ourselves that we're pointing at a thing, but when we say a thing, it's not actually the thing. So let's just get into it. Let's talk a little bit about how you all came to be labor organizers, and if you've done any other kind of organizing or political work in the past. And I'd love to start with you, Erin.
Oh, okay. I've worked in food service my entire life from like probably 15, 16 up until I was 30. And alongside that, I got interested in what I referred to as like social justice work or ecological justice work, things like that, when I was probably around like 18, and just had different forms of activism run alongside my life that I was never paid for, and would, like quit jobs, make sacrifices, move jobs, like all these little things to try and incorporate that into my life. Found like an economic justice route when I was learning about anti-eviction work and things like that. And I was like, oh, okay, material needs, got it. That's where I'm trying to be at. And ended up as a labor organizer because another organizer found me working at Jackalope Cafe in Bridgeport and was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, well, my teeth are rotting, and I've never been to the doctor, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm making below minimum wage. So they sat down with me, connected me with another organizer at NNU, and they took the time to teach me how to write raps, do one-on-ones, and apply for a job at Fight for 15. And when I got the call from my city director that I was hired, I was crying on the floor. So that's how I got into labor organizing. Very happy to be here. Was that too long?
No, that was great. And Erin, it's so funny. I remember because I also worked at Jackalope, and it was just such an interesting place to learn all about things that you might want to know about if you're organizing with fast food workers or food service workers in general. And I remember when you got this organizing job, I was so happy to hear, and also just how I could just hear how seriously you were taking it. Like it really is, knowing that your background is in food service and you know how much is on the line. Yeah, it makes me happy to know that you're doing what you're doing. How about you, Patrick?
So I guess I got involved when I got my first job. When I started working in the San Francisco Ballet Orchestra, I joined the American Federation of Musicians local in San Francisco, Local 6. And then a few years after that, I was elected by my orchestra to serve. So this has kind of got to go through the bureaucratic mess that is the AFM. So the AFM is divided into several different players conferences, which represents different kind of musicians. So there's like the conference for theater musicians, or the conference for recording musicians, etc. My conference is the International Conference of Symphony and Opera Musicians, and I was elected to serve as the delegate for my orchestra to that conference. So that's when I guess like I thought like I was really involved in like the bureaucratic part of the union, but like I got to really see how it operated, and it it was bad. It was bad. And then I eventually resigned that position once George Floyd was murdered in the back in the summer, because I just was like, I don't want to. We can go into it later, but there were things about the group that made me not want to go on that particular journey with them.
Awesome. And folks, in case you didn't know, Patrick is creating an amazing podcast called Classical Trader, launching this coming Monday, so 2 days from now. So if you're interested at all in what it's like to try to organize, or even what it's like to exist in classical music culture, and all of the ways that that institution has come, where it's come from, where it's going, what it's currently doing, we're really going to be diving into that with Patrick's podcast. So super excited for that, Classical Trader. I'm sure we'll talk about it some more later. And how about you, Ted? How'd you get started in organizing?
I think of myself as, I guess, a community organizer that happens to be working in a warehouse now, and I guess labor organizing. My background is in, I was a community organizer in the nonprofit space for a few years, where I focused on defending our communities against police and prisons, keeping our schools open, making sure people are fed, and making sure people had places to live. A lot of that work was focused in the sort of nonprofit lens, where it's directed towards legislative strategies, so trying to advocate with politicians a whole lot. And so, but it was all for, the goals were all aligned with the liberation of oppressed peoples. And so when I found myself working at Amazon, it was kind of the same thing. And now it's like, okay, like I'm side by side with our coworkers that are just getting ground down and extracted from. And it's like, okay, well, in any other place where we're oppressed, we need to organize to fight back, to liberate ourselves.
Awesome, Ted. And yeah, you and I met through the Coalition to End Money Bonds work. That's actually how I got to know you a couple of years ago. So I know that your roots run deep as far as trying to work toward ending the state's right to throw us in a cage, especially pre-trial, but in general. And it's really cool. I'm very excited to keep talking to you about how all of these things are connected. I think we're really having a moment where folks are remembering again and again, as we do, that everything is interconnected, and you cannot just put your finger on one issue. You have to have a big picture, interconnected view. So I think you bring a really awesome spectrum of experience, and I'm so excited to do more digging in. Here at Shred, we are all about investigating language and symbols, obviously. So let's get into that right away, and some of the words and symbols we encounter in organizing efforts. Ted, we've been talking to you about this question of like, what is a union? And how different folks tend to think about unions or define them, what we're told a union is or has to be. So can you talk about that a bit and just give us your definition of what a union is and why?
Sure. It's funny, actually, I had written some things down in preparation. I was like, I just didn't even, now in the moment, like I'm not really even feeling what I was thinking about earlier. I think everyone, it's like, what is a union? I think everyone has some idea of what it is, but everyone has like a slightly different experience or perspective of like where, for me, in my opinion, a union is a organized community of workers. Um, and I think that means, well, just to kind of break it down, we're organized means we unite, we come together, we recognize that we have shared interests, we take action, and we fight for our shared interests, usually against an oppressor or an exploiter, like a boss, like an owner. Um, community means we have a community of care, we protect each other, we share with each other, we connect deeply with each other, we have kickbacks and cookouts, and we check in on each other when someone's in the hospital. We make sure everyone is healthy, and supportive. We build each other up, and we are all stronger together than we are separately. And what did I say? Organized community of workers and workers. I think it has to be, a union has to be composed of workers, led by workers, defined by workers. It's the actions of workers. One specific example, so Amazonians United Chicagoland, of which I am a member, we are a union. We have united around shared issues. We've done petitions to build unity around with our coworkers. We've built community through a variety of different, just being friends and kicking back and getting to know each other and understanding what we're about and what it means for us to be a union, what it means for us to actually care and support each other, and know what it is that we are willing to do to protect each other. We confront management directly in a group. We've addressed and gotten many concessions and fixed a lot of issues with management disrespect, working conditions in the warehouses, for getting paid time off benefits, for getting COVID-19 protections and things like that in the warehouse. And so we are a organized community of workers. I think it's a topic that's in the mainstream right now because people are talking about, these union drives and union elections. And I think it's also important to talk about what unions are not. And unions are not, the paper contract that's approved by the government, that, bound by laws written by our oppressors. A union is not, outside staff or bureaucrats that make decisions for workers and claim to be, an organization that doesn't include or doesn't actually operate through the democracy of workers. And I think a union definitely is not folks that, are a third party or a customer service line or someone that you just file grievances with. Like, the union is the workers, the union is the relationship and connection between workers. And so that's kind of how I see it among the spectrum of, I think, all the different ways that people think about unions. And that's kind of the way that I've been thinking and trying to talk more about with my coworkers and folks that we're building with, to really build this idea that we can be a bit more, something that we can build up more and more, because that's something we really need right now to combat all of the existential crises that are facing us right now in this decade.
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously it's deeper than just the words we use. It obviously goes so much into like humans believing that we can trust each other, that we can build power together. But the words and the understanding of the words and making sure that we define the words that are most useful to us goes so far. And so I really, really appreciate your clarity on that. And Shred's working on a resource with TED. We're going to be having a illustrated kind of poster to kind of just really solidify this idea. And we're going to have it, and if like using different symbols that might mean different things to different people, but with these illustrations to really drive the point home. So keep an eye out for that. We're working on it. Erin, I'd love to hear a little bit from you. I know you work with Fight for 15 and you organize with food service workers. So what's it like to work towards such a well-known demand that's kind of become like a, like a well understood, like most people in the United States are familiar and have an opinion about Fight for 15. So what's it like to work with that kind of well-known demand with such a big union? And how does this relate to what Ted is saying about what a union is, as far as workers working, building power together and acting together?
Cool. I love this question because this is the question that's going to get me fired. I was thinking about this a lot, and Ted, I appreciate so much everything that you had to say, especially like what a union is not. So fast food workers are fighting to win a union, and our organizing is made very difficult by the number of units that fast food companies are able to claim. Like, if a Pete's Coffee district wanted to unionize in a locality, Pete's corporate could claim that from Singapore to California, that's all one unit. So that makes shop floor organizing very difficult. There are some sectoral bargaining routes that we're taking around these like very big demands, some legislative pathways and things like that. But really the heart of our campaign moves with site-specific, shop-specific, shop floor issues, which is one of the reasons why Fight for 15 is always so lively, because every McDonald's, every KFC, every Pete's Coffee, every Pret a Manger, like all of these places can hold strikes, make changes, win victories based on what their workers want to see done. And I think that the real, meat of the fight and the struggle as far as workers are concerned is a question of when and how. And I think that the passing of the PRO Act is going to make that a lot more clear, which better fucking happen. and I think that like real pressure from every single person that is aware of fast food, which is every single person, okay, is going to make their fight for a union possible. Or it is already possible. We are already winning, but it's going to make that win clear cut. And honestly, like these folks are fighters. They are parents. They are immigrants. They are like teenagers. They are high school students. They have 3 jobs. They have 4 kids. It's just like, do it for these folks. They serve us food, they treat us right. And, generally when they don't, it's an issue that they don't have the power to solve at their workplace because management is like displaced, or their CEO makes, $9,000 an hour and is like on a evil beach somewhere. Like, just do it. So
love those evil beaches. Oh
my God, they're beautiful, but gosh, they're evil. But yeah, so I think Fight for 15's work is just a little bit like maybe like different in structure, Ted, than like the kind of shop floor organizing that y'all are able to do at Amazon. But I think that it all like requires the same community, the same pressure, and the same, like, if we are acting like a union, we're a union. And yeah, but it's, folks deserve it. Folks deserve it. Working people deserve it. So the public needs to get on board immediately. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I guess I'm just one more thing, like in your outside of your organizing, when you tell people this is what you do, how do folks like, what's the range of responses you get about generally the concept of like the $15 minimum wage? And are folks like, do they have an emotional reaction to like the Fight for 15 slogan?
Well, I think when I started telling people that I was a labor organizer, it's the first time people got like a wash of respect on their face that I like suddenly noticed and was like, this is different. Instead of being like, I'm a barista, I work at, this restaurant, I'm on the line, or like whatever. So I thought that was interesting. But 15, like people are going to agree with you to your face. No one's ever, and then you're going to go into the like Fight for 15 or SEIU comment section and see a bunch of people being like burger flippers. And it's like, well, you do the job. you want, that's fine.
Yeah.
And it's really like, however people react to it, I 100 don't care, because like, it's not my job or my workers' job to persuade the public into humanizing a workforce that they rely on. Like, we're going to win either way. So either show up or get out of the way. And those are the two options that we make clear.
Nice. Love it. Cool. Well, on that front, Patrick deals in quite a different kind of set of circumstances and with different kinds of workers, I would say, than Erin and Ted mostly try to organize with. So Patrick, we're going to hear a lot about your experiences as part of the American Federation of Musicians, obviously with the launch of your awesome podcast, Classical Trader, on Monday. Can you give us just a taste of your experience and talk about the limitations you experienced primarily working within that framework, and how those limitations relate to the concept of a union and what a union is?
Yeah, it was extremely frustrating. Yeah, my audio should be okay now for the audience. You can hear my voice. Yeah, it was extremely frustrating. It was extremely limiting. The AFM is extremely good at coming up with reasons why they can't do things. And especially when it comes to why they can't organize new workers. It is frustrating would just have to be the word that I would use. I mean, as just to give you an example of the kind of obstinates you run into, I went to my local 6 in SF during the Democratic primary last year, because I wanted to talk to the board about, well, maybe we should talk about endorsing a candidate. At the time, I was like, maybe it should be Bernie, but like, could we talk about endorsing somebody for the upcoming California primary? And when I said that to the board, there wasn't a discussion, because a discussion requires an exchange of ideas. The response was, we don't do that. And that was it. And like, at that point, it's just like, well, I mean, where do you go from there? And every single time you try to do something in the AFM, if it goes outside of the very small box of basically business unionism, of service unionism, they are not interested in talking about it. The AFM is a very top-down model. The rank and file, basically our only job is to pay dues and show up for work actions when they need photo ops for the press. And that's it. So I could just clearly see that this was not, I have to figure out when I'm going to stop talking about this, because I could like go on and on.
Well, you do have a whole podcast, so just a taste, just the tastiest morsel.
Yeah. I think what was really amazing, and I think what was really like revealing about the AFM as a union, was my time as a delegate. We were dealing with a pension fund crisis because our pension fund for a very long time, basically up until Biden was elected and passed COVID relief, our pension fund was going down the drain. And there was an argument that was made that I don't think was unreasonable, that the trustees in charge of it had misled the participants and had not done a good job. And like, even if you didn't agree with it on factual grounds, the fact is that got a very visceral response from pension participants. There was a lot of dissatisfaction, and there was a lot of fear, because people were like, oh, holy shit, I'm like 2 years away from when I wanted to retire, and you're telling me you're going to cut my benefits by like 50%. So what was amazing about it was the reaction from leadership was not compassion. It was not understanding. There was not an acknowledgement of any kind of just even incompetence, just making a fucking mistake. It was, fuck you, we didn't do anything wrong. How dare you criticize us? Do you have any idea how hard we work for you people? How dare you complain about this? And I was like, I was on the receiving end of it at one of these ICSOM conferences, where I made I didn't think very controversial opinion that the two trustees from the pension who were going to participate in a discussion about the pension should not be there, since they were named in a current lawsuit alleging that they had neglected their financial responsibilities. And in response, it was just like, I was the asshole. It's like, how can you say that about my friend? They're such nice people. They're such wonderful people. So yeah, it was an extremely frustrating experience doing that within that system. And it's exactly like what Ted said. That's not what a union is. And that's what they think it is. They don't think the union is like the lady who comes to ask, like the old lady who comes to ask the AFM president, is like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do about my retirement? Like, I'm depending on this money. You know, that to them, that's just like, fuck, get out of here. I don't have time for that shit. We're doing the real work. We're the ones sitting in the room with the important people, hammering out the deals.
Yeah, and something that always gets my blood boiling is that you were given the advice of like, by the next round of negotiations, you really want to be more friendly with the board, right? Isn't that what somebody directly told you?
Oh my God. Yes. We had
Great.
it was incredible. It was our most recent contract negotiation where we of course had to take concessions because guess what? When you can't work, you can't really withhold your labor. So you're kind of like, we lost the one leverage that we had. And yeah, after taking concessions, a member of our bargaining team said, yeah, you just need to become better friends with the board and management for the next round. It was amazing.
Cool. All right. Well, so there's a spectrum, obviously, of how unions view themselves, how workers view themselves, all the ins and outs of that. Let's also talk a little bit about the human experience of trying to organize, of being in a union, emotionally, physically, and mentally. Here at Shred, we're all about trying to weave in the human experience into our investigations of science, politics, and culture, which are in fact all the same thing, surprise. And obviously organizing with your coworkers can be really, really emotional work. And we're up against a lot of dominant narratives that promote mistrust between workers, and kind of just like automatic, just kind of like assuming the power of the corporation is inevitable. And that makes us really susceptible to union busting, right? And also just generally makes it hard to believe that we really can win. So as organizers, we are tasked with not only refuting the dominant narrative, but presenting a vision of hope. And that, I know, at least from my end as a prison and police abolitionist, it's really emotional work because you have to think about who you're talking to and what they care about. If you're inviting them to expand their vision of what's possible and to take that risk and to say, I know you've been told all of these things your whole life. I need you to believe you deserve better. I need you to believe that we can actually have better. And I need you to sacrifice or work with me a little bit to win that. That's really emotional work. And I think you can tell when somebody's being authentic or not. And I think it takes a lot of energy to remain authentic. And I sense that everybody on this call is working to be as authentic as they can. So what have you and your comrades found helpful in building real human relationships? And Ted, I hear you saying, kick back, check on each other, get to know each other. Erin, you're talking about all the vibrant energy that people bring. So what do you find helpful in building those relationships and the kind of trust required to actually pull off something like a walkout or a strike or really any coordinated action to get folks to take risks together? Ted, let's start with you.
Yeah, I get very emotional when I talk about the struggles of organizing under just extreme oppression, hundreds of years of entrenched oppression. So just naming it so it's out there in case I just start sobbing in a minute, everyone will know, have the heads up. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to be when people talk about like labor organizing and maybe someone that doesn't have experience, like, oh, okay, it's just getting your workers on the same page because everyone wants the same thing, right? Like better pay. Oh, if everyone just put their hands in their pocket, then the bosses couldn't do anything, so isn't just making sure everyone's, oh, do you want to raise? Do you want to raise? Okay, let's all go on strike. Okay, here, you know what I mean? Like someone without experience might be like, that's how it goes. But when you're actually there in the workplace, talking with your coworkers and actually talking through these ideas, I think you quickly realize how you mentioned, Ruby, the dominant, normative, oppressive, there are hundreds of years of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy, and it's all coming in all at once, which includes, the capitalism part is like the individualism. It's like, oh, well, I don't need, why do I need to walk out for a raise? I can just, work my way up and get promoted and then get the raise for myself by kissing managers' asses or going out of my way or sacrificing more of my body than you are to get the promotion. You know, there's the individualism, like, why should I even come together with my coworkers? Why not just look out for myself? You know, the white supremacy aspect of the, you know, it's always the case that like higher management always way more white than the rest of the workforce. You know, you'll have, we had a case with the manager, this white dude that stands on the top catwalk of the warehouse looking over an entire floor of Black, brown, and other workers, literally like a plantation overseer. And then, but it's like, because of entrenched and just the systemic effect of white supremacy, it's also like different people of color don't necessarily see each other as automatic allies. It's also like, well, which we got to fight amongst each other to decide who's the highest of the underclasses in the racial dynamics. So there's that. And then, I mean, similarly with patriarchy, there's just the absurdity of how sexism gets in the way of people, of coworkers just kind of coming together. Well, oh, well, you can get that promotion more easily because of this. And so I think we're fighting centuries of oppressive systems that is not only in the institutions that we're in, it's also internalized in our own beings and minds and socialization that we're constantly working to break through and transform ourselves through uniting with our coworkers in a shared struggle and through fighting and engaging in actual struggle. And so, you know, the positive side, or the how have we been able to do it, you know, with Amazonians United Chicagoland, how have we, you know, how have I personally been able to connect with coworkers and build relationships and build our union through this is, I think in the end, well, first it has to start with conversations. And you ask like any worker in any location, like, do you talk with your coworkers? Probably half or even the majority is like, I go in, I put my head down, I do the work, get my paycheck and go home. And so already that capitalist individualism, isolation is already like, you know, but it has to start with, you have to have conversations with your coworkers. You have to have some way to communicate as human beings who we are, what we're about, what do we care about. And then beyond that, a lot of people will talk, and you'll find, you know, I'm sure Erin can share many examples about this. People will say, oh yeah, I'm totally down with this walkout. Oh, I'm totally down with this. I'm 100% in. You know, you get 50 people that are confirmed and like 10 people show up, or when the moment comes, like only some percentage, because of the fear, because of, you know, again, we're in the belly of the beast, the oppressive systems, fear that bosses may, you know, bosses don't give a fuck about the law. They may fire you even if it's illegal. They'll do it just to intimidate and to mess with people and to scare people and to control people. So, you know, fear of retaliation, regardless of legal protections, fear of being seen by your coworkers as a troublemaker, of fighting whatever the dominant culture might be, fear of being uncool, fear of being, you know, ostracized in some way. And so I think engaging in so, you know, definitely you have to have those conversations, deeper conversations. And then I think ultimately workers that engage and struggle together, that's when we start seeing each other like, oh, it, you know, that's when the solidarity is built. When we faced up, when 30 of us roll up on a manager and say like, we need fucking water right now. We're not trying to, you know, file a grievance or call HR, whatever else. We need it right now. We're all saying this, and we're not even going to get started until you get it. And then they drive, and then the bosses get scared, and then they drive to the grocery store and bring water. I was like, oh shit, we just did that just happen? Like none of us got, you know. And so I think it's engaging in struggle side by side that builds that connection and solidarity and relationship. And then, you know, of course, the rest of what I've talked about, building community, spending time, actually like caring for each other, being a caring union, spending time not talking about work stuff when we're out at the park or whatever. I think that is also all part of having a deeper community and relationship that allows us to stand together, go on strikes together, and know that people are coming through, know that we're going to have each other's backs, and actually have that strength and power to make shit happen.
Yeah, wow, yes, all of that, so agree. And I really resonate with the idea that once you take a risk together, you're more likely to understand that you can do it. And it's kind of like it feeds back and strengthens again and again. I feel like there's so much comparison between that and like direct action as far as like blocking a street or anything like that. I used to do trainings for like blockades, and it was just so transformative to take the risk and then invite somebody to take the risk and be responsible for that person taking the risk. And sometimes it goes wrong, and it does go differently, and also building up that capacity to say, wow, we should have done something differently, or now we know something else. And I think that was a big moment for me, was recognizing like, I'm not going to like lose all of my friendships as long as I, admit like, here's what I could have done better. And so I think that's also something that we are a little bit afraid of, and taking direct action, whether it's at work or elsewhere, can really be helpful in that kind of transformation. Erin, I'm excited to hear your thoughts. And I also want to kind of weave in another element here for you specifically. So obviously cultural and artistic activity is deeply intertwined with people's emotional lives as well, and senses of community. And I view you as somebody who has, who's a very big part and very present in the Chicago DIY scene and does a lot to kind of nurture that scene. And so I'm curious if any of your experience there feels like it translates to your organizing efforts, or vice versa. Like, is there overlap? And then also I'd love to hear anything you have about like actually building trust in your current work.
I thought so much about this question. So I started at Fight for 15 and started, professionally labor organizing on January 6th of 2020. So, and I think by professionally labor organizing, I mean that we are doing it in kind of the most effective way that we can, given the circumstances of fast food organizing, or at least trying to, and always refining that process. And I mean that I do it like 80 hours a week, like 6 to 7 days out of the week, all the time. And I did that for, just a little over a year. And during that little over a year, I did not have contact with my music community, my arts community, my DIY community. I'm a very in-present person. The work that I make is performance. I don't really do digital stuff for reasons that we don't even need to get into. There's the only connection that I've really had has been obviously like the very close friends that I maintain, but that's our friendship, and Chicago's local United Musicians and Allied Workers Alliance, which came into my life relatively recently. So I feel like my organizing doesn't have a connection to DIY Chicago. And I also feel like I'm going to be stepping back into that community a very different person, and that's going to be kind of a shock to me. And I've been learning where that lies when I take some of my organizing into Chicago's UMAW local. And as far as like where the community building, the nurturing, the wanting to be around people, the like being able to like foster space where people can come together and create, like I do see alignment there. Like I will live and die in the basement, because I think that like if you're gonna play, if I'm gonna help provide space, microphone, cables, whatever, it's gonna be for folks that like, I don't know, it's just like that's the intersection for me, is like who's trying to be heard, like who's trying to like create this space, not go occupy it for a moment. But I think that's a lot of what UMAW is trying to do, is be like, hey, venues, cool, this is our workplace, this is ours, and fast food workers, and it's worker identification, like this is my workplace, this is mine, it's not yours, it's mine, and it can be ours if you pay us and give us water and treat us right. Like, so I love that for the Chicago DIY community. I'm excited to walk back into that, because things are going to be different. But I mean, I just think like I like giving people tools, and if it's a microphone or a megaphone, that's kind of all the same to me. Although I do think that building trust and building solidarity and building labor power and labor awareness is much easier in a place where people identify it as a workplace. I don't think that all music workers identify their work as labor because they have been taught to identify it as a natural talent, as a very special moment. You know, like, I don't know. I don't sense that specialness in anything that I do, which is also probably like weird, but for real, like everybody screams, everybody plays an instrument, everybody has, like, it's just a part of what we do and who we are. And like, I feel like I see it outside of the human community too. So I don't really understand why it's all that special, but that's besides the point. But that makes it easier for me to access that this is labor. If I'm hauling gear, if I'm on a stage, if I'm sweating and performing, if folks are really about it, if it helped like change the shape of a person's day, that's a labor, that's a service. And I really want to see that identification happen for music workers in Chicago and everywhere. Allied workers know it, you know, and that's the gig work complex that we get into. But I also like, you know, I think just like building that labor power is so important. And really like what you're saying on, you know, in the shred, in the language, taking it apart, like the most important thing I think that the folks I support at work learn with me is that when you're working, you're alive. Like you're alive while you're at work. And that's a moment where we lost Ted for a second. I have to acknowledge that. You're back. But yeah, and then we can kind of move from there. A lot of folks say I like to keep my work at work, but how much of your life is that? You know, and yeah, I mean, how much of your life is that? How old are you? How much do you have saved? Yeah, so I think that that's where the trust starts happening, is when folks are like, oh, when I'm here, I'm still me. And then they start to see us. But I don't know. I also just want to name that everything that you had to say, Ted, I was really like breathing through, because this is, and I appreciate you picking up that question, because it's really deep, and it's really like emotional, and it's really watery to think about that trust. And I appreciate how you expressed all of that. Because I still don't know what I would say about the whole lifetime that goes into that process. So thanks.
That was really beautiful, Erin. Thank you so much. And I think there's so much that we've started to talk about here a little bit with Shred, and specifically our comrade Clara was talking about how she doesn't view herself as a performer. Like, she's not like, oh, I'm performing music. She's like, I'm providing a service that people are in need of. And to me, there's no difference or hierarchy between the performer and the audience. It's just, we're in music together right now. That's a thing humans do. And when we get into this music is now a commodity, and so I am working to produce this commodity, that's a whole different relationship than like what a lot of humans have to music or art, which is just, I do this because it makes me feel alive. I do this because it calms my child down. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, after this next question, just about in general, how we think of labor and compensation and all of this. But I think also, you know, part of the big picture vision that we're trying to nurture is one beyond like you were saying, Erin, one where it's like, oh, I'm a worker when I'm at work, and then I'm myself when I'm away from work. And it's like, no, your nervous system is present the whole time. Your cognitive brain is present the whole time. You're feeling things, you're sensing things. And so it's almost kind of a dissociation we can go into whenever we're like in an abusive work environment that facilitates you keeping your head down, because our brains feel more and more isolated the more threatened we feel. So we lose the ability to hear each other. We lose the ability to trust each other. And I think that's done on purpose in a lot of cases. There's these conditions that have been manufactured to make us feel afraid, to put us in our fear brain instead of our collaborative brain. And so I really want to think about also the embodiment of trust when it comes down to like, we can say we trust each other, but if you're getting ready to do that action and there's a knot in your stomach that's like not going to let you, how can we also factor that kind of stuff in and think about what it means to have an embodied sense of like, I am in a union. What does that feel like in your body? You know, how can you know that versus just saying it? Patrick, I want to get your perspective a little bit. And I know you're on the spot here with the you know, this whole other realm of pretty hyper individualistic stuff. So we've talked about the hyper individualistic narratives that keep people divided in music and art workplaces and communities, especially where people are getting a lot of money and have a very specific role they play. And there's a lot of stability, I think, that can almost lead to more individualism in some cases. So what kind of culture do you see in classical music, and how does that differ from some of what you heard Erin and Ted describing? And does this impact classical musicians' abilities to organize or to even see themselves as workers capable of solidarity with other workers, especially those that are poorer than them?
Yeah, I mean, for that last part, absolutely. Yeah, the people I work with do not identify themselves as workers. I mean, for the most part, they do not. They really don't see that they have anything in common with these other labor struggles, even though they, you know, the argument you often hear bandied around is it's just like, well, we're like NFL players. And then, of course, the obvious response is, well, they got a union. I mean, they have a union. They are workers. Like, they are extremely well paid workers. But if you're looking at it, where they function in the capitalist system, they're workers. They're just collecting a wage like everybody else. So it's yeah, there's definitely a huge divide in what the people I work with see, and that they have in common with anybody else who's working class. Like, I honestly feel like we identify ourselves more with the donor class that gives us the money to do our jobs, because it's what's very interesting is that all of the organizing, any of the little organizing that happens within the AFM is done in a very PMC way, because organizing in the AFM means you're hiring a lawyer, and you're hiring a lawyer to tell you what to do, and that's it. And that's and you think like, well, that's not organizing, but you also realize like, well, they're kind of like mimicking our donors, because what do rich people do when they want to get their way with something? Well, they call in the attorneys. They start spending money. So in my union, we think that the more money that we spend, the stronger we are going to be, and that's not the case. It hasn't been the case for decades. What was the first part of your question? It was a long one. I forgot.
It was really long. Just thinking about the culture in classical music and that is kind of beat into classical musicians or infused into them through the process of becoming a classical musician.
Well, it's very interesting because it is this unionized field. I mean, there is not, I can't think of any classical orchestra in the country that isn't organized with the American Federation of Musicians. And yet the training that we receive is just like cutthroat individualism. Like, you are in competition with everybody you're in school with right now. There are this number of available jobs. There are this many number of you. You just have to be the best. And you have to do what it takes to be the best to get to those good positions. And the people who do get there are like treated as gods. You know, they're treated like they have like attained divinity. And that is completely at odds with effective union organizing. And you can really see that exemplified. So like, for example, a few years ago, 2019, Chicago Symphony went on strike, and they had an actual picket line and everything. It was great. They were out there, they had their signs, and I can see Erin making some faces. But because I've heard some stories about how that went, and especially how antagonistic they were towards the other unions that came to try and support them. And
Patrick, if I could just for one moment say that my brother is a bassoonist who just left a South Carolina orchestra to pick up saxophone and leave orchestra behind because they were so poorly represented.
That's fantastic. Good for him.
Bassoon is a trap. I mean,
it's a big trap.
And he told me very much about how they threw the civic orchestra under the bus during their strike. Okay, I'll let you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, it was so basically the problem with that strike was not every musician was on strike, because some of the musicians went to other cities. They went to other cities to play in other orchestras because they had friends there, and their friends were like, hey, why don't you come in and play a week or two? You only make $200,000 a year. You couldn't possibly be out of work for 2 weeks without having to sell your children into slavery. So not only are they not on the picket line, not on the picket line with their orchestra, when they go to those other cities to take those jobs, they are displacing local freelancers who usually get that work, local freelancers who really do need that money. Like if you're a freelancer in the Bay Area, a gig with the San Francisco Symphony, it's just like, that's a couple of grand for a week's worth. Like, holy shit, you need that work. And some asshole from Chicago who comes in, who's making $250,000 a year, wants to do a gig with his music festival buddy from like 50 years ago. It's totally counterproductive to any kind of actual labor solidarity. And it really, like, there are friendships, obviously there's those social connections. I'm not going to say like classical musicians are cold, unfeeling people that don't have friends, but it never goes beyond that. It's just friends, and there's never any bigger identity beyond that. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why, there's a lot of reasons why that strike didn't work, but a big one is because they didn't have everybody on board. They had a bunch of people leaving. They had people who were there actually reporting to management about what the musicians were doing and what they were talking about in their meetings. I mean, that's the kind of thing you're up against, and it's a cultural problem. And I have to admit, it's one of the things that makes me a little pessimistic about being able to do this. But I mean, I think that there is going to come a point where people realize, like, no one gives a shit about classical music. We're not getting paid the way we are because we're doing anything valuable for society. We're getting paid what we are because we have a union. And because we have a union that can negotiate a collective bargaining agreement for us, that doesn't just make us all do it one-on-one. And that's why we have the jobs that we have. So we have to preserve the union, and that means we have to make sure we need to make sure it survives. We can't just sit back and say, well, I'm just great. That's why I get all this money. Because as soon as you lose that protection, that's when you lose everything else. I mean, maybe you'll be one of the privileged that kept pets, but the rest of us, I mean, I can't think of a single major American orchestra that doesn't have something in their contracts about job security for musicians. Like, I have actual tenure with my job. It's why I feel comfortable talking out about it, because I know I can't be fired at the drop of the hat. How long do you think that shit lasts? Without the power of collective bargaining, it's not going to last for very long. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Patrick, so much for being willing to say all of this. You speak with such clarity. And I think that while it's obviously magnified in the work that you do, that attitude is what capitalism wants us all to think of ourselves, right? There's always this, like, I can get ahead. It's I'm specially talented. You know, there's so much narrative that goes into how we think of ourselves. And I think you just really highlight it very well. And this classical music environment is such a great place to kind of get into and dissect these narratives, because it's so clear there. And I'm very excited also in your podcast to talk about how classical music has been, is what it is because of white supremacy and colonization, and how it continues those legacies to this day. I know you have so much to say about the racial justice issues within classical music, and the philanthropists that fund the orchestras with blood money. Definitely.
Can I talk about that? Can I tell the Louisville thing?
Yeah, actually, yeah. If you want to give the 2-minute version, yeah, and then we have one more question for everybody, and we'll get going by 30 after.
So Louisville, Breonna Taylor murdered. Her murder is connected to gentrification related policing activities. We know that gentrification is done to the benefit of developers because they get to move into those neighborhoods and build a bunch of shitty condos and make a lot of money off of it. Well, on the board of the Louisville Symphony sit a bunch of executives from people who are directly involved with real estate development, or are realtors or construction companies. And the opening of their season, the Louisville Symphony did a tribute to Breonna Taylor. And that's the kind of thing that that's the kind of thing we'll be talking about on Classical Trader.
Yeah. So really thinking about how these philanthropists launder their image and their money through through these highly funded, workplaces that are, of the arts. And it's like, what are the arts? You know what I mean? And what is funded as the arts has a lot to do with white supremacy and colonization. And so lots to dig into there. And just thinking about the potential and also the challenges of radicalizing someone who is at this point making $250,000, really a lot to think about there. So really appreciate your perspective. This is the last question, and I want to pose this to all three of you. I think you're all going to have really great things to say. Obviously, so many of us now don't work in central workplaces. There are so many gig workers, people like me who string together incomes from like various, I have like 2 part-time things and a bunch of contracts that I do. I don't, nothing that I do is like my one job with my one set of coworkers. I don't have health insurance through any of my jobs. And of course, so many people never get compensated for the labor they are performing every day to simply keep themselves and their loved ones alive, right? We have all kinds of labor that specifically capitalism depends on the unpaid labor of primarily women, people who bear children. So much of how we treat poor people is as if they're just manufacturing workers that are unstable enough that they will take low wage work. Obviously, and from my perspective, I'm always very concerned about the role incarceration plays in destabilizing communities and making people have to take low wage jobs. So all of this is at play here, but specifically the lack and the disappearance of some centralized workplaces for so many people, especially our age. So do y'all have any insight on how we move forward with a radical form of unionism that points towards building a world economy based on care, community, and abundance for all, not just narrow interests of one union's members? So how do we talk about our efforts within unions and as workers, not just about how do we get paid more for this specific job, but rather how do we change our world toward care, community, and abundance for everybody? And how does this relate to the understanding of the category worker, right? Because obviously this is a word that we hear in so many historical documents and currently today. And many people are quick to say, your analysis has no room for people who don't have jobs. And I think it does. We just have to change our definition of worker or be clear about that. So I'd love to hear first from Ted. I know that was a very long, convoluted question, but do you get the drift? Do you think you can answer?
Maybe one part of it. I think the idea that we can simply like organize with coworkers in one workplace is already like that's archaic. I mean, take just using Amazon as an example, since I'm a worker there. It's such a big logistics network. They have, I don't even know how, 500 or 600 warehouses. Any one organized warehouse could have 100% worker strike for indefinite, and they would just route packages through another warehouse or another region. I mean, our counterparts in Europe are far more organized than we are. Many workers, and I mean, basically Amazon workers in the entire country of Italy went on strike just last month. Workers in Germany have been organized to be able to strike in entire regions of Germany, and Amazon redirects packages through Poland, where wages are about a third of that in Germany, still gets the packages to the German customers through Poland. And so I think the idea of taking over, organizing individual workplaces, that's already, especially for larger companies, especially in logistics. But I think even I think that's I just don't think it's strategic to try to like organize one shop at a time or that sort of thing. And so back to your question of like, so with the more gigified economy, with the more people aren't in huge concentrated workplaces where you're seeing each other and so on and so forth. I think part of it is about organizing as a class. Part of it is about building community and culture that is not only limited by an individual workplace. And by that I mean, so organizing as a class means, however we identify. And like for me, it's like sometimes in spaces I tell people like, what's your organization? And well, now I'm part of a union, so that's got to be my first thing. But before we were in this union, like my organization is all oppressed peoples of the world. And so like as a class, that's us. So whoever is like, okay, there's someone exploiting me, Okay, that's them, and that's who we're fighting against. All of us that are doing everything, making the world work, but then getting a nickel while everything else is getting stolen from us. Okay, this is us. We're a class, so we're on the same side. What does that mean? How do we treat people that are on the same side as us? Do we look out for each other? Do we care for each other? Do we have a conversation with each other? You know, we all work someplace, even if we don't work in the same place, we all live someplace. Are we organizing as tenants with the same landlords that are also extracting from us? We all potentially have worship someplace, and through our faith. We all engage in different community activities. What is the, you know, is there a community garden that we are connecting with each other on? And so, you know, where are the spaces that we are connecting? I think that's, you know, organizing as a class, and then community and culture. So building community, you know, we have many coworkers, because turnover is so high at Amazon, because it's so demanding. People's bodies break down in a couple of years and they have to quit, or they have to quit for family reasons, or because the hours are changing a mega cycle. Like, who can work from 1 a.m. to 12 p.m. if they have kids that they got to get ready for school, especially women, if they have, you know, elderly or others that they have to take care of, also especially women. When Amazon switched to this mega cycle, it was basically a sexist mass firing of women from their workforce. And so it's like, many of these, because of the ways that we've built community beyond just the shop floor, many folks that are no longer working at Amazon are still part of our organization community together, because we still have this relationship, and they're still showing up to our our strike lines and picket lines and our walkouts. And so, you know, deeper relationship, not just like, oh, once you're no longer a coworker, well, we don't need to build anymore, I don't need to know you. No, we're like, we've been through shit together. Like, this doesn't end just because Amazon said you're not legally employed. Like, no, we're still in this together, and we're going to continue living that way. And then the culture aspect, I think, is like on the movement side, which is like, if we are able to build the culture where, and, you know, again, applying to the warehouse context, where, you know, nobody puts up with bullshit and disrespect from the bosses. Like, whenever that happens, we confront them, and we confront them as a group. Every time there's something going on, or someone's health is at risk, someone gets dehydrated, passes out from dehydration, anytime someone gets injured, you know, this is how we act and respond. Someone could show up and it'll be their first week on the job, but if this is the culture that we've already built, it's really quick that they can kind of be involved in the culture that we, and not only that, when people leave and go to other jobs, they bring that with them too. I've had former coworkers, they don't work at Amazon anymore, they're doing something else. They're, you know, in healthcare now, and they're like, man, I remember that petition that we did for this thing. Like, I was talking with my coworkers here, we got to get that petition going. You know, we need to do a petition for our, you know, for our bereavement leave, whatever it might be. And so I think those are the ways that I've been trying, you know, broadening beyond the workplace, organize as a class, build community that extends beyond one workplace, build culture that is quickly transferable between each other, coming into or out of our workplaces. And I think that I'm hoping, like, more of my experience is in the Amazon warehouse, but I'm hoping that that is also applicable to musicians that are, you know, in different places, gig workers that are all over. You know, hopefully we can use the tools available today to you know, build them in those ways as well.
Wow, you are on fire. That was amazing. So inspirational, so much insight there, and definitely just appreciating the clarity of, like, if you're oppressed, you're my organization. My organization is the oppressed people of the world. That is as clear as it gets. Erin, any words you would add, or any reflections on how we do this?
I was so immersed in what Dad was saying, I forgot to unmute. I just want to say, like, thank you so much. And I'm totally stricken by how much that resonates with fast food organizing, which I think, like, kind of speaks to the point where it's like, we're really in this together. And it, you know, like, there are so many folks, because the turnover in fast food is aggressive. And, you know, a lot of that is because folks are working overnight shifts that just, like, are so hard on their kids, their families, their bodies, the whole thing. But also hours are so low in fast food because they're always trying to keep labor really low, give people only part-time hours, barely. put folks on like once or twice a week, maybe one shift a week for 4 hours. We saw that a lot during the pandemic, which is like, okay, you're going to ask me to live off one can of beans. Like what's the, making minimum wage or sometimes below minimum wage. It's just unbelievable. But so folks, the turnover is really high. Capitalists rely on that because then they don't have to, give folks healthcare. People don't have enough time to mount these important union campaigns and stand up and fight for their rights. But the folks that leave out of fast food, we stay in touch because we have a relationship, and they come out. And like, I get calls where it's like, okay, I'm out of Amazon, I'm back in fast food because like, Ted, our industries are like this right now. And it is, one of my folks who I have like deep love for, I don't know if they want to be named, but she just left Amazon Fresh, their grocery store situation, because they were getting text messages every single day for like 17 days in a row or something like that, about a COVID case in their store or in their district, and people, move around between whatever. And they ended up back in fast food. So they're like, hey, I'm back with Fight for 15. I'm like, baby, you never left. Like, this is, it's a community. And that feels like that is a life affirming thing just for me personally, to feel in community. Because I think that that's something that we almost like don't know it until we find it sometime, at least, for me. But and as far as like building cultures of care, and like building that idea and expanding on that idea of like one big union, I think a lot about how when I'm walking around in the world, there are like all types of people, and none of them are bosses, like I'm constantly surrounded by people that think that they're better than each other and also are on exactly the same team. And Pat, like one of the things that really blew my mind that you said to me, or I think maybe Ruby said, whatever, how do we organize folks that make $250,000? And it's like, we do. Like, we sure do. Because we've got a lot more in common with them than we do with Jeff Bezos, who is, rerouting packages through striking Italy to Poland, which also blows my mind. And I think like, that's how it is. There's an us and a them. And it's like, there's one landlord. She lives right up there. There's one CEO and like maybe like a couple other people in power, right? But the power is so centralized. And if we just looked at each other and we're like, we're probably in the exact same position, and like, and our culture makes that really difficult because of the like frivolous signifiers that we like put on our feet, or, rent or buy a condo or whatever it is, the neighborhoods we live in, whatever. And the other thing that I would say, and I know that I'm like losing my eloquence, it's been a long day, but is that I think that and I'm just going to ask every single person that hears this, to just make a careful and like loving decision to become more curious about conflict. We have to become more curious about conflict because it's so good for us. And if we don't start that cycle of conflict, we never get to the part where there's repair. And everyone deserves so much repair right now. And I think what I've learned from you, Ted, is confronting managers directly is something that we don't do as much in Fight for 15. And I'd like to make an effort to change that, because unfortunately we can't organize managers because of some bullshit 1980s union busting legislation. But managers are in it too. They're barely making $1 more, whatever. I mean, I don't know how it is at Amazon, but and we ask for something called radical complicity, but I actually think that conflict is much more important. And I just like, I want folks to know that like life is long, we make mistakes, we have good and bad conversations. And as long as we're in that cycle towards repair, it's okay to be in conflict and to get curious about it and get interested in it. And I think that's going to help pull us together in a way that uniforms, politeness, customer service, bathroom breaks, tears us apart. So that's pretty much all. That's what I'm on right now. It's like picking some fights and getting into that cycle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Erin. I really love bringing it back to curiosity, right? Not like conflict is fine or we should have more, but rather what can we learn from it? How can we be more curious about it? Here at Shred, we're really trying to take a approach of not prescribing solutions, but rather asking a lot of questions and trying to figure out where we're at and what's possible. So yeah, Patrick, I'd love to hear anything you have to add.
Yeah, so from my perspective of being inside a formally like organized labor union, I think what we can do to help this is to first of all make sure that our labor unions are built on the rank and file, that we flip that top-down model around and we make sure that there is actual involvement and engagement from the rank and file workers. I think a really great way that you can do that is to advocate for democracy within your unions, like the UAWD is doing right now to try to get direct elections of their national officers. I am actually interested in doing a similar project within the AFM because we also have that system where we don't get to directly vote for our national officers. We only get to vote for delegates who then get to cast the actual vote. And I think that what we should be doing, every labor union, every big, real union like mine should be doing is figuring out ways to support workers who are doing the fight, who are working, engaged in the fight for 15, or people who are trying to organize fast food workers, or people who are trying to organize Amazon workers. We need to be there to support them. Something that happened last year that just blew my mind was the Nashville Symphony reached a concessionary agreement, and as part of the news bulletin they sent out announcing it, they thanked Amazon. And at the end of it, they thanked Amazon for being corporate sponsors, and they had a big Amazon logo down at the bottom. And this is not from the symphony, this is from the actual local 257. And to me, it's just like, no, that is inexcusable. That cannot happen. And you look at the map, it's like, you're not that far from Bessemer. What are you doing for those folks? What are you offering for them? And it doesn't have to be huge. Do you have like a spare room in your offices that could be used for organizing or storing shit? Why don't you offer it? The important thing is what we need to be doing in these big unions is talking to other organizers who are doing more radical work and saying, how can we help? Maybe we can't, I don't know, but maybe we could. I mean, unions still, even though they're on the decline, they still have access to a lot more resources than most of these grassroots organizing efforts do. And instead of wasting that money like my union does on lobbyists and lawyers who don't give a shit what my contract looks like, because one way or another they're getting paid. Why don't we start seeing if we can use some of that money to help some of these radical worker movements? And maybe, just maybe, if we do that, the next time we need help, maybe they'll remember and maybe they'll come and help, because that's kind of how it works, right? People, it depends on what you're doing for people and how willing they are to help you. So that's the way, from my point of view, that's what I try to do with my organizing work within the movement.
Awesome, Patrick. So well put, and such a great vision of instead of feeling so separate between these high-paid workers and folks who are in low-wage jobs, saying, look at what we have in common and how can we help each other, and let's remember and let's build these community memories. I think that's how everything gets done. So really appreciate that perspective. Our last question today, and you can make it as short or as long as you want, though we are about 3 to 8 minutes from where we're supposed to end. Just what's one thing you'd like to say to people in general this May Day? I'm going to start with Erin.
Let me know if you need a strike notice.
Simple as that. How about you, Patrick?
I just spilled water on myself. Sorry. I would say that don't forget about how last year showed us that everything that we assumed to be inevitable and unchangeable immediately got thrown out of the fucking window. It's one of these things I think about. We in the AFM, we always think of things as being so unchangeable. And my thing was like, well, what happens if something that happens outside of our control, like, I don't know, a global pandemic? And it can change things, and that doesn't go away after the pandemic is over and we're all going back to work. Like what we saw during COVID and during the lockdowns is that none of this is set in stone. It can be changed. Things can be different. And if anybody tells you that you're wrong or you're not being pragmatic or you're immature, you don't have to listen to those people, because they have been proven wrong so many fucking times that there's no point in engaging with them. They're just talking to themselves at this point. So, you can change things.
Amazing. Yeah, one of my dear friends, Bria Royal, says, this is all just made up shit and we can make up better shit. It's as simple as that.
Money is literally paper. It's fancy paper.
Yes. All right, Ted, how about you? One thing you'd say to people this May Day?
There are more of us than there are them. We have the power. We just have to grab it and trust ourselves and each other. Have those conversations, talk with each other, talk with your coworkers, find out what issues you care about, do something, take action, do a petition, scare your bosses a little bit, fight for what you know you deserve, what we all deserve. We all deserve better. And we need to be trusting each other and ourselves more to be able to get united and fight and win what we deserve.
Absolutely. Beautiful words, everybody. I think to that, I would add, try to spend time every day imagining the world you actually want and talk about that just as much as you talk about the problems and the things that you hate, because I think having a shared vision, even if it feels like it's a utopia that we won't reach, is just as powerful as having a shared analysis of what we're up against. And I know I'm a lot more willing to get up and make sacrifices if I can tell why I'm doing it. So take time, be imaginative, don't feel ashamed if things feel unrealistic. As Ted said, you deserve better, we deserve better, we can have better. Rest is not something to be earned. Rest is a right, food is a right, housing is a right. And we could be spending our time doing such cooler shit if we didn't have to struggle every day just to live. And I want to just show you all this very cool shirt. I used to run the IWW bookstore for about 3 years, and our friends in France sent me the shirt that says, "I won't work more than 8 hours a day after May 1st, 1912. How about you?" And then it says, "Join the union of your class, international workers, industrial workers of the world." So one of my favorite shirts. And on the one big union tip, just want to draw attention to the fact that this has also been a struggle led by people of color, led by women, led by queer people, led by artists and musicians for well over 100 years. But we are part of an ongoing legacy, a process, and who knows what's right around the corner. So I so appreciate all three of you spending time with us this May Day. I can't wait to see what the future holds for everyone. And I hope you all get some rest and find some joy today as well. Major solidarity with all of you. And thanks so much from everybody here at Shred. And thanks, folks, for listening. This has been Shred Radio. You can find our website at shred-mag.com. We've got all of the former Shred Radios up there, some really great articles that have come out. We're going to be working on some more. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We have a YouTube channel now. If you want to subscribe, we're on our way to getting the subscriptions we need to get our own little URL. So that's our little goal. If you want to go ahead and subscribe at Shred Magazine at YouTube. And if you want to toss us a little bit of money, if you like what we're doing, you can become a patron at patreon.com/shredmagazine. We've got different levels. At every level, there's a cool gift you get. So we'd love to send you some cute merch or a patch or a CD or something. Patreon.com/shredmagazine. And that money goes to fund our artists and our writers. And also we donate to mutual aid funds. And also we have to run our website and stuff. So that's all the housekeeping. Much love and solidarity again to everybody today. And thank you all so much for speaking with us here. Happy May Day, everybody.
Happy May Day. Don't go to work.